I'd like to introduce Deanne Minniecon. I'll leave far away, Deanne.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Deanne Minniecon. I'm both from the Torres Strait Islands and both Aboriginal, so Erup, which is Darnley Island, and Gorang Gorang, which is around the Bundaberg region in Queensland. I'm one of the group executives for Aboriginal engagement with Diabetes Australia, and I'm coming from the lands of the Tarablang Bunda people. When we talk about obesity or address the issues of obesity for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in Australia, we have to consider a few things. And that's Australian history, our own history, and the impact that's had on Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, the environments where we live to support those healthy lifestyles, and what strengths our communities are currently living with. So prior to colonisation, we know we were healthy people. As Louise mentioned in the acknowledgement, we were the first scientists, but we were the first dietitians, the nutritionists, the health professionals in the world. So past policies placed on Aboriginal Islander people have interrupted those skills. But they've also interrupted our food supply and food systems, our culture, and how that knowledge is passed down to our next generations. So Aboriginal Island people had restrictions placed on access to their lands and their natural resources since colonisation. And so this has impacted on hunting and fishing and access to those nutritious foods and food sources for some communities across Australia. Our original healthy lifestyle have been replaced with Western style foods that are high in sugars and fats. We know that up until the 1960s, and in Queensland it would have been about the 1980s, Indigenous people were on missions and farms and were paid often in rations of the worst kind. So our white flours, our refined sugar, our salts, our teas. So that's really influenced, and it still carries on today how we use those as well, those ingredients as well in the foods that we eat today. So you can see the negative impacts that this has had on our people, both physically, socially, emotionally, cultural, and spiritually. So the outcomes include the most rapid growth rates of obesity, disability, chronic illness, and physical distress. Next slide, please. So access to affordable nutritious food is an ongoing problem in many remote communities. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so look, I'm going to go off script here. I did have a beautiful script, but one of the things that we need to take into consideration when we're thinking about obesity and how we can create healthier lifestyles for people are the environments that people are living in. You can see in these images, there's issues around roads. So that's main roads, transport, when there's weather events, climate change. It impacts on whether food supplies are able to come into communities, particularly those remote and rural communities. Access to safe pathways for walking, whether that's pathways, whether that's lighting, whether that's security, or whether that's animal management, and so something that the council needs to deal with. When we used to deliver a brief intervention many years ago in Queensland Health, we used to visit these remote communities and say, you tell us to walk, but one of the problems that when we go to walk is the animals, and not just the dogs, but the bulls and the snakes and the kangaroos and those sorts of things that restrict that activity in those communities for some people, not all. And also that water quality. So while we say drink plenty of water and less sugary drinks, what we don't understand is in a lot of these communities, there are issues around water supply and water quality and the water taste and what the water looks like and what the water smells like. And this just doesn't mean that we have to drink this water. It's about food safety issues too, when we're asking people to wash their vegetables before they eat or their fruit before they eat. So we need to take consideration of all these bigger social determinants that impact on our health and well-being in terms of obesity. We're also looking at the food supply in stores, and I've experienced it myself up in the Torres Straits, where the barge came in, dropped the fruit and vegetables off, and I think that went in a few days, and the barge wasn't coming back for 2 weeks. So while we say eat plenty of fruit and vegetables with these beautiful programs that we develop, we don't actually take into consideration some of the challenges that people have in accessing healthy food and fresh food supply. So we need to kind of think about these things. Now, this is having a huge impact on our communities, and particularly for now, it's really impacting on our young people. We're seeing the increase of type 2 diabetes in young people across the top end of Northern Australia. That's, being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at the age of 4. Now, this is unacceptable, and it's getting worse, and we need to do something urgently about it. And then it'll also impact on rates of obesity as well. Next slide, please. So we talked about all the challenges. around food insecurity, the diets. But we also have to understand that in Aboriginal Islander communities, there's some really beautiful strengths that we have. And a lot of us still have access to our cultural foods where they are available. We encourage people to access those as much as possible. We have eaten these foods for many years. But one of the things that we need to understand is sometimes when we come in with our own Western value ideas around how we actually manage that food or treat that food before we eat it, you just have to talk to community about some of these things. So for example, dugong or sea cow, when you cut that up, the fat from there, when they boil it and they create the dugong oil is actual medicine. So when we're asking people to cut fats off meats, we need to think about what that actually means for people's health and well-being and spirituality as well as there's a cultural process and protocol around when they do hunt and gather for food as well. But the food is not just medicine, it's cultural practice, it's learning language, it's learning connection to communities, all those sorts of things comes in there. So I guess where I'm coming from is use the communities' knowledge and histories and strengths of that community when we're working with communities around addressing obesity. Take those that celebrate their culture, acknowledge the histories and acknowledge the challenges that they face as well. But we do have a lot of strengths in those communities. Right across Australia, not just in the remote communities, but also in those urban and regional areas as well.